Deep inside the UK National Archives, filed under the designation MPK1/426, sits an original 1910 Royal Geographical Society map. Across its surface, someone has drawn bold, hand-colored zones in blue, red, and brown. In the bottom corner, two signatures are dated May 8, 1916. One belongs to Mark Sykes, the other to François Georges-Picot. This document, officially termed the 1916 Asia Minor Agreement, represents one of the most consequential backroom deals of the 20th century. It was a secret pact between Great Britain and France, with the assent of Imperial Russia, to partition the Middle Eastern territories of the Ottoman Empire. Sykes and Picot took a map, laid it flat, and carved up the Arab provinces into European zones of control. Today, their names are shorthand for imperial arrogance, and this map is widely cited as the original sin of the modern Middle East. But the true story of how these lines were drawn, and what actually happened to them, is far more complex than the myth.
By late 1915, the First World War had locked the Triple Entente, Great Britain, France, and Imperial Russia, into a brutal conflict against the Ottoman Empire. The British, desperate to weaken the Ottomans from within, looked to local Arab leaders for a strategic alliance. Between July and October of 1915, British High Commissioner in Egypt, Sir Henry McMahon, exchanged a series of letters with Sharif Hussein bin Ali, the Emir of Mecca. In the Hussein-McMahon correspondence, Britain explicitly promised to support independent Arab governance in exchange for an Arab revolt against Ottoman forces. Relying on this British guarantee, Sharif Hussein prepared to mobilize his people. But even as those promises of Arab independence were being written, political realities in Europe shifted. France had its own historical and economic ambitions in the Levant, and was unwilling to see a vast, unified, independent Arab state stretch all the way to the Mediterranean coast. To keep their fragile alliance intact, the British realized they needed to divide the anticipated spoils of war with the French. They just needed to do it quietly.
The secret partition began formally on November 23, 1915, when career diplomat François Georges-Picot met with a British committee led by Sir Arthur Nicholson in London. The initial talks stalled. On December 16th, a Tory Member of Parliament and Middle East specialist named Mark Sykes briefed the British War Committee at 10 Downing Street. 5 days later, Sykes replaced Nicholson as the lead British negotiator. Over the following weeks, Sykes and Georges-Picot held near-daily negotiations at the French embassy in London. On January 3, 1916, the two men initialed a joint memorandum containing their compromise map. By May 9th and May 16th, the agreement was officially formalized in secret through exchanged letters between British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey and the French ambassador in London, Paul Cambon. The Middle East had been sliced in two.
The resulting map was a masterclass in imperial ambition, divided into 5 distinct regions. The blue zone was assigned to direct French control, covering the Syrian littoral, Lebanon, Adana, and Cilicia. The red zone was assigned to direct British control, covering southern Mesopotamia, including Baghdad and Basra, as well as the important ports of Haifa and Acre. Between these zones of direct control lay spheres of influence. Area A designated inland Syria, including major hubs like Damascus, Aleppo, and Homs, intended as a French sphere for an independent Arab state or confederation under French protection. Area B designated the region from the Egyptian frontier to inland Mesopotamia as a British sphere for an independent Arab state under British protection. Finally, there was the brown zone, which covered Palestine, including the Holy City of Jerusalem. Because of its religious significance, it was designated for international administration, pending consultations with Russia and the Sharif of Mecca.
There was just one massive, undeniable problem. The Sykes-Picot Agreement directly contradicted the promises the British had just made to Sharif Hussein bin Ali. The secret 1916 agreement assigned inland Syria and the Levant to French influence, while the 1915 Hussein-McMahon correspondence had promised that exact same territory for independent Arab governance. For over a year, the agreement remained a closely guarded secret among the Allied empires. But in the fall of 1917, the Russian Revolution dismantled the old imperial order. The new Bolshevik government wasted no time in exposing the secret treaties of their predecessors. On November 23, 1917, the Bolsheviks published the full secret text in the Izvestia and Pravda newspapers. 3 days later, the Manchester Guardian published the text in English. The secret was out. Arab forces actively fighting against the Ottomans realized they had been preemptively divided as spoils of war.
Despite the public outrage, the map dictated diplomatic maneuvering as the war came to a close. But the lines drawn in 1916 were not set in stone, not even between the empires that drew them. On December 1st, 1918, French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau and British Prime Minister David Lloyd George met privately at the French embassy in London. Realities on the ground had changed. British troops occupied much of the territory, and the prospect of massive oil reserves altered the strategic calculus. During this meeting, Clemenceau verbally yielded the region of Mosul to Lloyd George. Mosul had originally been placed squarely in the French sphere, Area A, under the 1916 terms. With this private agreement, Britain acquired Mosul outside of the original Sykes-Picot terms, fundamentally altering the borders of what would become Iraq. The carefully color-coded map of 1916 was already being overwritten by new geopolitical realities.
Today, popular media frequently asserts that Mark Sykes and François Georges-Picot established the permanent, straight-line borders of modern Middle Eastern states with this exact map. But historical records show this is an inaccurate simplification. Most of the specific 1916 Sykes-Picot borders were actually superseded. Following the war, boundaries were heavily renegotiated and replaced by the 1920 San Remo Conference and the subsequent League of Nations mandates. The final borders of the modern Middle East were shaped by a messy, prolonged process of treaties, local uprisings, and shifting power dynamics over the next decade, not just a single stroke of a pen.
Yet even if the exact geographic lines shifted, the legacy of the Sykes-Picot Agreement remains profound. It stands as the quintessential moment of imperial presumption, two diplomats prioritizing a European balance of power over the ethnic, religious, and tribal realities of the people actually living there. The map itself may have been filed away in the National Archives, overridden by later treaties and concessions, but the profound breach of trust it represented permanently altered the relationship between the Middle East and the West. It turned an Arab alliance into a struggle against European colonialism. A century later, whenever geopolitical instability erupts in the region, the shadows of Mark Sykes and François Georges-Picot are still there, a reminder of the enduring cost of drawing lines in secret.